Welcome to Studio RC and an encouragement for your recovery and your faith. My name is Max and I am an alcoholic. We welcome you to our newest series as we kick off the new year 2026. We're going to jump into a series that I hope will encourage you and help you get off on the right foot for this year. Now, if you're listening today, chances are you didn't get here by accident. Most of us arrive carrying a story. Some parts redeemed, some parts still healing. The series we are kicking off for the new year is called Legacy Builders. And before we go any further, let me just clarify something very important. Legacy is not about status. It's not even about success per se. It's not about being remembered. Legacy is about what gets passed on because you were here. Let me say that again. Legacy is what gets passed on because you were here. In recovery, we understand this concept deeply. None of us heal in isolation. Someone carried hope to us, the people that came before us, sometimes imperfectly, sometimes quietly, but faithfully. Now, Scripture tells us in Psalm 145:4, one generation commends your works to another. Faith was never meant to be hoarded. Recovery was never meant to stop with us. It was always meant to go on. So in this series, Legacy Builders, we're going to explore what it means to live in a way that leaves something life-giving behind. Not money, not reputation, but faith, freedom, and spiritual health. And we'll talk honestly about things like mentorship and sponsorship, living for others, finishing well, and how everyday faithfulness becomes generational impact. This isn't about pressure, it's about purpose and being intentional. You don't have to be perfect to build a legacy. You only have to be willing. So wherever you are today, early recovery, long-term sobriety, questioning your faith, rebuilding your life, you are welcome here. So let's lean in together and discover more about how to become a legacy builder. Let's jump into episode 3 of Legacy Builders. And episode 3 is Living for Others. Living for Others, episode 3. Now, one of the most honest things that the big book ever says, and maybe one of the most uncomfortable, it tells us that self-centeredness is the root of our problem. Not weakness, not lack of willpower, self-centeredness. And that truth doesn't just apply to addiction. It applies to life and to all people. But we as addicts and alcoholics, that's one of those things that we want to stay on guard for. Addiction, it trains us to ask one question over and over again. What do I want right now? What do I want? What do I want? What do I want right now? Recovery begins when that question starts to change. Maturity, both spiritually and recovery maturity, is marked by a deeper shift when we start asking the question, who needs me right now? We go from what do I want to who needs me right now? Significant shift in our approach and understanding. So helping others. And that's what today's episode is about, living for others. Paul makes a radical call to followers in Philippians chapter 2, the third and fourth verses. It says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but rather in humility value others above yourself, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interests of the others. When I first read this scripture early in my faith journey, oh, this one leveled me. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Like, don't do anything for yourself. Don't do, that whole concept of self-care. Don't do things that are selfish. I always kind of cringe a little bit when people say, that it's a selfish program. The truth is, everything about the program is the opposite of selfish. It's trying to break down self. And then the scripture says, don't do anything out of selfish ambition. Like, don't do, I want what I want. But in humility, something I wasn't well acquainted with early in recovery, in humility, value others above yourselves. Now, and we just, in humility, value others above yourself. If you just stop right there, resentments, frustration, anger, annoyance goes away if in humility we value others above ourselves. Because it's hard to be resentful that when you're valuing someone above you, when you're trying to serve them, when you're trying to, like, the motives get skewed if we don't have humility in those moments. And it says, not looking to your own interests, the things you want, but each of you to the interests of the others. And what a powerful scripture. It's not soft language. Paul doesn't just suggest this as like a helpful mindset. He presents it as a way of life. In humility, value others above yourself. Oh, it's a tough one. But what an incredible way of life, an incredible way to live life. And notice what Paul is confronting: selfish ambition, empty pride, inward focus. Paul's naming all of the same internal challenges that addiction feeds on. Self-first living doesn't only damage others, it slowly erodes us from the inside out. Recovery doesn't just remove substances, it retrains, it reframes our orientation from survival skills and me first and that to how can I help others? How can I put others first? It's a significant shift, and a shift that I still today need help remembering and being reminded of. Step 12 brings the truth into recovery with clarity. It tells us in the big book about how service anchors our sobriety. Helping others strengthens our own recovery. Giving away what we've received keeps us spiritually fit. So often when we want to give self-love or want to forgive ourselves, we think about like sitting on the couch and like, I'm going to love myself. I'm going to forgive myself. You want to know the best way to love yourself? Is love others. You want to experience forgiveness? Forgive others. It's this paradoxical truth that if the things that you want, if you give it to others, so often you receive it yourself. Love others, you feel loved. Forgive others, you feel forgiven. It's not, there's an action to it. There's not just sitting on the couch waiting for it to happen. I think that's so often what we think. We have to be reminded addiction thrives in isolation as well as self-absorption. Whereas service pulls us out of that and pulls us outward. We're no longer inward, we're going outward. And when we only live for ourselves, resentment grows, entitlement grows, loneliness grows. But interestingly, when we live for others, our perspective widens, our gratitude, it deepens, our purpose returns, purpose of helping others, having that vision. And this isn't moralism, it's survival. Living for others doesn't weaken our recovery, it protects it. I think often of Bill W., and I don't know how many months into his sobriety, and he had been going to bars, and he was telling people about how he had found a solution, and no one got sober, and he was home complaining to his wife. He said, Lois, I've been doing this, I think it was 6 months. The historians out there can correct me. And he said, I haven't gotten a single person sober. And her response was, but yeah, you haven't drank. You haven't picked up. And that you are helping others. Even if the intent was to help others, even if it didn't in fact help anyone up to that point. I'm sure there were some seeds that were planted. As we're thinking about helping others, we want to keep humility, service, freedom at the forefront of our mind. And that's the paradox, both in Scripture and what recovery teaches us. Freedom is not found by focusing on ourselves. Freedom is found by being freed from ourselves. I'll say that again. Freedom is not found by focusing on ourselves. Freedom is found by being freed from ourselves. I love this thought and this definition of humility. Humility isn't thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. Now you might have to let that one. Humility isn't thinking less of yourself. It's not thinking, humility, it's like a false humility to say, oh, I'm no good, I'm not worthy, I'm lower than whale's dung, and you're like, oh, woe is me. And no, that's not true humility. It's not thinking of myself as often. That's humility, putting other people first, not putting myself on the top of every list I make, or maybe even not making the list. That's humility, and that grows. When Paul tells us to consider others above ourselves, now he's not calling to eliminate ourselves. The big book says, what will become of us? Will we become like the hole in the donut? And I don't know if that's big book or step book, but it's talking about asking God to come in. But like, if God comes in, do we become this non-entity? That's never what the Scripture or recovery literature is talking about. Paul is calling us to right-sized living. Humility, another definition of humility, is sober judgment. And the only way I can be right-sized is if I have sober judgment, honest appraisal of who I am, what I've done, what I'm doing. That's right-sized living. Being, I'm not the worst person in the world, I'm not the best person in the world, somewhere in the middle. What does that look like? That's right-sized living. Recovery, it exposes the lie that fulfillment comes from being served. So many of us in our addiction, just wanted people to take care of us, wanted people to deliver our goods to us, to take care of us, to pay for. If people would just see it our way, just take care of us, then everything would be all right. Instead, what recovery teaches us is fulfillment comes from usefulness. If you've ever served, whether at Recovery Church, in an AA meeting, even a soup kitchen, it is amazing how no matter what your mood is when you get there, you always feel better when you leave. That's a rule of thumb I have for a meeting. You go to a meeting, and I always feel better leaving a meeting than when I got there. And if I'm feeling good, I'm feeling even better. If I was feeling a little off, I'm not feeling as off. There's something about usefulness. Like when you go serve at somewhere like a soup kitchen and you're helping the community and helping other people, why is it that when we leave, we feel so good? We feel so encouraged. We were there to help others, yet somehow we drew a benefit from that. Um, there's something about being useful, serving others. Our joy comes from contribution, from contributing to life, contributing to other people's lives. As it tells us in the step book, the joy of living is the theme of our 12th step. That's the whole point. We didn't get sober so that life could be stinky and that we're morose the rest of our lives. No, it's about joy. Meaning comes from giving, not from taking, not receiving, but from giving. Service reconnects us with humanity when we're able to serve another person. And that connection heals places addiction just hollowed out when we're able to help and serve others. Living for others doesn't require a title or a platform. I think if you ever say something like this, if only I was a fill in the blank, then I would help others. Or that if only I was a pastor, if only I was on staff, if only I was, and then I could really help people. Then that's not the right motives. Helping others, living for others, serving others doesn't require a title or a platform. Sometimes in doing so, you get a title or you get a platform because people have recognized what you're doing, but that's not why you do it. That's an ancillary benefit of serving others. So you don't need to have a title of pastor or secretary or treasurer or president or whatever in order to serve others. You can just serve others. You can come alongside of other people. You can create opportunities to serve others. I tell people, if you don't know, you're praying the 11-step prayer and you're praying for the knowledge of God's will, the power to carry that out. Like, God, what are you up to? How can I join you? If you're not sure where to serve or how to serve, go to a meeting. Go to Recovery Church. There's always opportunities to talk with people, to connect with people, to encourage people. Living for others shows just up in ordinary faithfulness, listening without interrupting or trying to fix the person, or showing up without being asked. Showing up to a viewing or a funeral for someone whose parent passed away, or just being there, being present, serving without needing credit. We last year were at our Recovery Church Movement annual conference, and it's when all the campuses come together, and we were a little short-staffed in our merchandise table, and so who should go serve there? Pastor Phil, the CEO, the person who created Recovery Church, the person who leads us, saw that there was an opening, and he went and helped. And he had an interaction with a conference goer who was complaining about something that they had purchased or something that was really giving him the business. And he was very gracious. And the person did not know who it was. And it was early enough in the conference that he hadn't gone up front and spoken yet. And I always wondered what the person's reaction was when they saw Pastor Phil up front. We have someone at Recovery Church who serves without needing credit, and I think just to blow to Pastor Phil's horn for just a moment, we have a super humble leader for Recovery Church, which is exactly what we need. And with all of the addicts and alcoholics and pastors and all the potential egos, God chose someone who had humility, who has humility, and is this quiet, steadfast leader, not a promoter, which some of us on staff, maybe we skew that way. But God knew exactly what he was doing. He chose a servant leader as our leader for Recovery Church, not needing credit. He doesn't need he doesn't need me to tell this story about him serving at the merch table. It'll probably make him embarrassed. But that's what living for others looks like. In recovery spaces, living for others can look like welcoming the newcomer, answering the phones in a group, or telling the truth with love, staying present when it's inconvenient. Addicts, alcoholics, newcomers, we can be messy. And staying present when it's not always pleasant, when it's not always convenient. That kind of life reshapes legacy quietly. And remember, that's what we're talking about. The whole legacy, and we're talking about legacy of living for others and how that makes a difference in serving others. In the old adage, people don't remember what we said. They remember how we treated them or how we showed up when it mattered. Like, again, showing up for funerals, showing up for viewings and weddings and those kind of things. Being present makes a difference. Living for others is where legacy really starts to take shape, because we consistently value others, and others eventually inherit those things that we're doing, that service. People see us living selflessly. They learn faith is active, recovery is generous, love is practical. One of the things that's super frustrating, on Sundays, when if you ever gone out to eat after church, and if you get in a conversation with the wait staff, it is not uncommon for them to complain about how cheap people can be who have just come from church. That hurts my heart. People in faith, people in recovery, we should be some of the most generous people within our means, but we shouldn't be miserly. We know that God will provide, that God will continue to provide. That's living selflessly. That's not looking for credit, but blessing others, being generous. Legacy is formed not by grand gestures, but by repeated choices to place others before ourselves. Not grand gestures, repeated choices to place others before ourselves. And those choices, they leave fingerprints long after we're gone. Addiction tells us life is about taking. Faith and recovery teach us life is about giving. Living for others isn't a burden, it's release. It frees us from the exhausting task of managing our own importance. I think so often people talk about burnout sometimes in ministry or in the things they're doing. If we have burnout traditionally is relying on self and on my power, not God's. Even in serving others, and as challenging, as difficult, and as messy as serving others can be, if we're relying on God, and God gives us, that daily reprieve, and God is filling us and renewing our mind every morning, and we're going through that process, we won't get burned out. Burned out is when I think I can do it. I don't need help. I'll do it. Living for others isn't a burden. There's a release to it. And let me ask one last question of legacy during this episode. What exactly am I leaving behind? Think about that question this week. What exactly am I leaving behind? What are the fingerprints? What is my impact? Am I living for others? Am I making a difference for other people? In our next episode, we'll take the question, head on as we talk about leaving a godly inheritance, not just materialistically, but spiritually and relationally. And that helps prepare us as we tackle that next episode. Thanks so much. As we close the latest episode of Legacy Builders, let's just slow down for a moment. Legacy is not something you build later. It's something you're shaping right now, which is why we chose to kick off the year 2026 with this series. How you show up, how you handle setbacks, how you speak, serve, and stay sober, it all matters. Recovery teaches us that consistency is what changes lives. Not dramatic moments, but faithful ones. Step 12 reminds us that what we've received is meant to be shared. Not perfectly, not even loudly, but honestly. And faith reminds us that God works through ordinary people who are simply willing to keep going. So here's a gentle question to carry with you. Who might be stronger tomorrow because you chose faithfulness today? You don't need a platform. You don't need a title. You don't have to have it all figured out. You only need to stay present, stay honest, stay available. If this episode stirred something in you, don't rush past it. Sit with it. Pray about it. Journal about it. Talk it through with someone you trust. And if you're walking this journey alongside others, a sponsor, a sponsee, a mentor, a friend, remember, you are building something that matters. As we continue this series, we'll continue this conversation of being a legacy builder. Now, we encourage you to be sure to like, to share, to subscribe, do all those great things. We want to just continue to increase the footprint of Studio RC. So until then, stay grounded, stay connected, and keep building what lasts. And remember, Recovery Church, 12 steps, one goal. God bless, and we'll see you next time.